This is Vice Chair Michael Hopkins, and I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Would Deputy City Clerk Megan Wilbanks please call roll?
All right, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Cooley? Here. Commissioner Houghton? Here. Commissioner Jorgensen? Here. Commissioner Munoz-Morris will be absent. Vice Chair Hopkins? Here. And Chair Khan will also be absent.
There we go. All right, at this time, we will hear any public comment for items not on tonight's agenda. Items raised are generally referred to staff, and if action by the commission is necessary, may be scheduled for a future meeting. Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
All right, Chair, thank you. So far, I haven't received any speaker cards. However, if there are members in the public that would like to talk about items that aren't on tonight's agenda, I'd be glad to receive those. Okay, Chair, seeing none.
Next, we will go on to the consent agenda, which is the consideration of minutes for the February 8th, 2023 Planning Commission. Do I have a motion and a second to approve consent? All right, all in favor? And all opposed say no. None opposed? Okay.
Chair, if we could just take a brief pause, I'm just going to try to reset the mic so that you guys can unmute it well.
Leo, come. Leo.
Mine's working.
What was that? Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you for your patience with us tonight, everyone. We are now on to the public hearings item. Any court challenge to the action taken on public hearing items on this agenda may be limited to considering only those issues raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the City of San Luis Obispo at or prior to the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please give your name and address.
I'm going to walk the dog. Peyton.
Okay. Great, thank you.
We can have some radio
Take a
interference.
little break. Thank you for bearing with us, everyone.
Test, test, test.
Thanks for bearing with us, everyone. So let's see, where were we? I will just repeat the public hearings item because we weren't complete with that section. Apologies. We are now at the public hearing item before us is to review a draft ordinance amending Title 17 of the Municipal Code to provide a downtown flexibility density program. Would Housing Coordinator Kyle Bell please present the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here. There we go. Everything's in order. My name is Kyle Bell. I'm the Housing Coordinator for the Community Development Department here at the City of San Luis Obispo. Tonight we'll be reviewing the proposed Downtown Flexible Density Program that was identified as a program in the Housing Element update for Program 2.5 and Policy 6.6. Tonight's action is to provide a recommendation to the City Council regarding the introduction and adoption of the Downtown Flexible Density Program. The concept of the flexible density has been around for a while, for the last 9 years, starting with the adoption of the 2014 land use element, which directed the city staff to consider alternatives to standard density practices in the downtown. The program was also discussed in the 2017 Downtown Concept Plan, and then it was also evaluated as part of the 2018 zoning regulations update, where our consultant, MIG, provided a white paper associated with the implementation of a flexible density program within the downtown. In 2020, both the housing element update and the climate action update specifically identified flexible density as a program to achieve community objectives related to housing production and climate action. The flexible density program was then specifically identified as a program under the 2021 to 2023 major city goals for housing and homelessness. Before we jump into discussion about the flexible density program, it is important to note that this program is only one tool the city uses to achieve housing objectives throughout the community. The program is intended to work in concert with other housing initiatives, such as fractional density, reduced impact fees for smaller units, streamlined review procedures for housing projects, and is intended to complement the recent changes to the inclusionary housing requirements. The Housing Element Program 2.15 directs the city to evaluate a flexible density pilot program and initiate an update to zoning regulations and community design guidelines to incorporate flexible density development options in the downtown core and portions of Upper Monterey and Mid-Higuera special focus areas to support the production of 50 smaller residential units, 150 to 600 square feet per year during the planning period. Policy 6.6 is very similar to this language. Based on the housing elements policies and programs, a draft of the program has been prepared, which includes the following key features. The program reduces density limits for units that are less than 600 square feet in size, prohibits residential uses on the ground floor to address development in the flood zone and preserve the commercial character of downtown, reduces minimum parking requirements for qualifying units in the CR zone to match the existing provisions of the CD zone. The program also exempts qualifying units from the inclusionary housing requirements as an incentive for the program, provides developers the option to use flexible density program or density bonus, since there is no method available to provide a density bonus to a property that doesn't have a density limit. The program also includes an expiration date of January 1st, 2029, which is the end of the current housing planning cycle, or until 500 new residential units are either entitled or permitted, whichever occurs first. No changes are proposed under the development review procedures, and no changes are proposed to development standards such as building height, floor area ratio, lot coverage, etc. Since 1977, the city has utilized a program commonly referred to as fractional density thresholds, which allow for the reduced density thresholds for smaller units and increased density thresholds for larger units. Under existing density standards, a one-bedroom unit less than 600 square feet is equal to 0.5 density units, whereas a standard two-bedroom unit is equal to 1 density unit. An example of a 600 square foot unit has been provided on the screen for reference. The flexible density program would reduce the density threshold to 0.0 density units for qualifying studio or one-bedroom units within the downtown core. All other unit types, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, etc., would be subject to standard density, fractional density thresholds. So what does this mean? In the staff report, an example property was identified to convey the potential increase in residential capacity of a property through the proposed program. For example, a 10,000 square foot lot could accommodate a maximum of 16 units or less than 600 square feet under today's density thresholds. Under the flexible density program, the same 10,000 square foot lot could provide as many as 36 units with an average size of 550 square feet, which is only limited by the building area and life safety requirements such as egress, hallways, and access. One of the most prominent concerns that has been expressed about the proposed program is parking. To provide some clarification, the proposed parking reduction under the program would be only available to properties zoned CR within the downtown core. In 1981, parking requirements were reduced in the CD zone to 1/2 that required elsewhere in the city. The program does not introduce any changes to existing parking requirements in the CD zone, and only intends to extends the provision equally throughout the downtown core for qualifying units under the program in the CR zone. As identified in the recent adopted Access and Parking Management Plan, there are over 2,600 public parking spaces located throughout the downtown area, and the existing downtown residential overnight parking program is underutilized, which will remain available for any newly created residential units as part of this program. The map on the screen shows all the public parking lots and structures as purple, and all the street parking as red. The green areas on the screen are all existing private parking lots throughout the downtown. According to the Public Engagement and Noticing Manual, the process for the ordinance adoption would typically fall under the inform, consult process because the program is specifically identified in the housing element as a program, and this council's major city goal was to bring the program to review within this fiscal plan. However, the public engagement approach for this program followed the consult collaborate approach due to the sensitivity of downtown and interest in housing needs for the community. The public engagement efforts consisted of consultations with various city departments and divisions. We provided an open city hall community forum that received 304 responses. We provided city news releases to all the major news releases, stations within the area. And then we also provided stakeholder group interviews with 15 different interest groups to communicate a roundtable discussion regarding the program's the key concepts. Presentations were also provided to the Downtown Association Board of Directors, Chamber of Commerce, and the Regional Housing Action Team. Pursuant to the CEQA guidelines, an addendum was prepared to ensure consistency with the environmental determinations of the 2018 zoning regulations update for the implementation of the Downtown Flexible Density Program. The addendum concluded that the program, as proposed, did not result in any new or more severe environmental impacts, and is consistent with the scope of the previously approved 2018 zoning regulations update. This actually concludes the staff's presentation, and please let us know if there's any questions.
Thank you. And do we have any questions? Planning Commissioner?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. As someone who lives downtown and noticed that where I live is exactly outside the boundaries of the downtown core, I was hoping you could speak a little bit about how the boundaries for the downtown core were arrived at.
Yes. So the downtown core is an existing boundary that was identified in the land use elements. And so the staff was evaluating how to establish a boundary that encapsulates the areas that the housing program had identified. As shown on the screen, the housing program did identify Upper Monterey and Mid-High Guerra special focus as potential areas for such a program. And so we identified that downtown core was most inclusive of those areas as an existing boundary. Using existing boundaries rather than creating a new boundary, we wanted to present this as a first option for consideration. And then if the program is to continue after the expiration date, we'd be open to other discussions and opportunities about whether the program should be expanded or whatnot.
And that's a good segue, because my next question was going to be about why the expiration date was chosen. We saw some comment from correspondents on the agenda about why have an expiration or a sunset date on this at all.
Yes. So the housing program did identify. The program was intended to provide for 50 units per year within the housing planning cycle. And so that 500 unit cap was identified as consistent with 50 units per year, since the housing planning cycle is 8 years. So there'll be 450 units, and so we rounded up to 500 units. But further than that, there's also lots of reasons why a cap is helpful for such a program, because right now there's without a cap, we have policies under growth management to consider. We have policies under water allocation to consider. We have other public services that we need to be able to plan for if we were to make this a permanent program for future growth in the downtown. So right now we identify the cap as appropriate based off of our current infrastructure within the downtown core.
I'll just, if I could add, based on some feedback we've received during the outreach process, we do plan to check back in with the Planning Commission and City Council on the program by the time we reach the 250th permit, so that the option would be there to extend the program or make the best decision available at the time. So that what we're concerned about is that as time goes on, as you get closer to the 500, people are not going to maybe concerned about the risk of putting an application forward and then running into the cap.
Thank you. That makes sense. My last policy question is, you described this proposal as being complementary to the inclusive housing. Could you talk about the relationship and why staff believes it's necessary to provide an exemption to inclusive housing?
Absolutely. So as you know, we just recently adopted the inclusionary housing ordinance update that modified the provisions of inclusionary housing citywide. Previously, under the previous ordinance, there was a provision that exempted all projects that had an average unit size of less than 1,500 square feet in the downtown. So we recognize that eliminating that requirement as part of the inclusionary housing ordinance was appropriate under a nexus study and a fiscal analysis. And so the program that we were trying to present today is the goal of the program is for housing production. And so we were trying to introduce incentives to help produce more housing in our downtown core.
One more piece of information that I want to highlight is that downtown projects that take advantage of flexible density are not exempt from the inclusionary housing ordinance. It's just that the flexible density units themselves don't drive an additional requirement.
And do we have any other additional questions for staff? Commissioner Jorgensen?
Did you consider at all the possibility, or is it even feasible to consider the possibility of not requiring parking for these smaller units?
Yes, we reviewed a lot of different options for parking for the program. We arrived at a compromised approach to maintain consistency throughout the downtown core to ensure that parking is addressed through the program. We're open to feedback on parking. I think that's one of the areas that is most widely discussed during this program. And so we're open to feedback from the Planning Commission or the public regarding that aspect of the program.
Thank you.
Okay, so the way that this works, if you build units that are less than 600 square feet, then they don't exist for the purposes of density calculations, and you're limited really only by setbacks, which there really aren't in the zoning, and height limits. Is that right?
Yes, and floor area ratio.
And floor area ratio.
Mm-hmm.
So they are included in that calculation, right?
Yes, so the floor area ratio for downtown is 3.0, which is a multiplier of basically the size of the property. So if you, that 10,000 square foot lot would allow for a 30,000 square foot building.
Okay.
And then just one more thing, we've got design guidelines too, which provide for, they implement a general plan policy that talks about setbacks above the second level for downtown buildings. So our design guidelines still call for articulated buildings that have
That look pretty good.
setback. And, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So a developer then could use some number of these sub 600 units to help to make a project more feasible and create more housing units. They could create a mix of those and larger units that would, it's just a different way to get to a higher density project, right?
Yeah, that is correct. The properties would still be eligible for the standard density allowances. So under our 10,000 square foot example, you're allotted 8 density units under the existing density. So you could build 8 two-bedroom units, and then in addition to whatever space you have left over in the building, you could add as many 600 square foot units as you could, as you would
Okay.
like.
And then the height limit and the route that gets you to the 60 or 75-foot height limits, that's unchanged in this program?
That is correct. So those community benefits would still be a requirement if you were to exceed the 50 feet height limitation in the CR zone. And one of those community benefits is required to be affordable housing.
Right. Okay. So the idea then is that by creating these smaller units that would be market rate units, they would not be deed restricted, right?
Correct.
Or it'd be up to the developer, I suppose, but they'd probably be market rate. And the idea is that that would address this market need by virtue of the smallness of the units that would make them affordable, we hope.
Not necessarily. The program is really intended for housing production, and so this is a way to provide housing for a single household isn't the right term. It's a more independent living. Oftentimes we have a surplus of 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom units within the city of San Luis Obispo that oftentimes find shared households. And so this would be an opportunity for people to have more independency in seeking housing options in the community. In addition to the small size does hopefully provide for some sort of limit of how much somebody could charge for one of those units based off market demand.
But that's totally up to the market, right?
Yes, under the current program, yes.
And have you done any guessing or estimating of what those units might cost, either as rentals or as purchased units?
Yes, we have done some research on similar projects in the community for how much a studio or a smaller 600 square foot unit would go for. It's difficult to predict how consistent they'll be throughout the future for the next couple of years, but at this time, those size of units seem to be potentially attainable for those who are earning between 120 and 160% of the area median income. So not necessarily affordable, but attainable.
Just another example might be the San Luis Ranch and one of the housing products out there that they call the nano units, which are very small, 400 to 600 square foot units that are intended initially to be sold. They were condos, but at the price point that they were looking to recover, they had a change of plans. I mean, it might have been a change in interest rates and other things that led to that, but ultimately that project is reverting to a rental housing project.
So developer owned and rented property.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of looking for a price tag. I mean, we just don't know. Like 300,000, 400,000
Oh, for sale or for rent?
for sale, or for rent, 1,200 a month, 900. I mean, we
Yeah,
just
the-
have no idea.
Based off of, we have looked at similar projects throughout the city of San Luis Obispo, and so as a standard studio right now can be found between 1,500 and 2,100 at this time.
Mhm.
And then, a larger 1-bedroom unit could be, a little bit higher than that. But that's just for this year. It was very different a few years ago.
Okay, and
The
likely.
sales price of those San Luis Ranch units was in the mid fours.
Uh-huh. Okay. And there's likely to be either association or other building fees that would be on top for common areas and utilities perhaps. And so I don't know. I know this isn't really an affordable housing project. It's a more housing project, right? So, but I'm interested in that angle and if it might help. I mean, the thought is that it will help with that, right?
I can share that the SLOCOG is currently working on a affordable by design study to identify the different metrics within cities' policies throughout the county and all the jurisdictions about how to develop housing based off of design or policy. So
Okay.
there is some additional work efforts we're exploring and introducing that will evaluate different options for design specific criteria that could help with providing more affordable housing.
Okay.
And we've also just seen that supply helps.
Yeah.
As projects come on the market, it has an immediate effect. It's maybe a short-term effect. Like ultimately, there's way more demand than we can satisfy. But when these projects are delivered, especially when you have multiple subdivisions and housing projects occurring at the same time, it does have an effect of depressing prices.
Or slowing them down a little at least. Okay. The 50 per year, that's a aspirational number. It's not a cap of any kind. Is that right?
Oh, correct. That just comes directly from the housing program. So we're not going to be limiting 550 per year. It'd be 500 in total.
Okay.
And then there are also some provisions under the ordinance that was introduced about projects that are currently active under entitlement or building permit processing that could continue even once we hit that 500 unit cap, so that you're not punished by having an active application under processing.
Okay. And there were a number of public comments in the written submittals that were concerned with the 500 unit cap and the expiration date or the deadline. But it seems like this is our first pass at this, right? And that we're going to check back in halfway, whenever that turns out to be. And we are free to amend, course correct, however we see fit and however the public advises us as well. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Okay. And this business of the density, flexible density, and the density bonus, that question was asked already, but it sounds like it just, is it sort of just an apples and oranges thing?
Yeah, if you're trying to do the math on the density bonus, you can't really establish a base density when flexible density is available. So when you have that 0.0 allocation, you're identifying your base density is nearly impossible. So there wouldn't be a way to formulate a density bonus on top of that.
So it's kind of a math problem.
Yeah.
So even if you have even one of these flexible density units, then you're not going to be able to calculate a density bonus, and therefore you got to do one or the other.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, there was concern about that, but it sounds like, okay, I'll let that be for now. Well, that does it for my list, and we can move along.
I have just one question. In talking about the 500 unit cap and being based on existing services to the units, can you just talk a little bit more about the methodology with how that was determined to be the cap and not, was it a middle of the road number? Was it a very conservative number? I just wanted to hear a little bit more about how we arrived there.
Yes, under the environmental review process, when we were addressing the addendum, we looked at residential capacities throughout the downtown core. We identified several properties that had potential for redevelopment, and we looked at the housing element that identified different properties in the downtown that were appropriate for housing development projects. And so we did an evaluation of how many residential units could this program, ultimately produce in our downtown. And we identified that I think the addendum identified maybe 1,000 units was feasible under the term of the program. However, we decided to be consistent with the housing element program 2.15 that identified 50 smaller units per year, which as of 450, and we just simply run it up to 500 to make it a little bit easier to track and yeah.
Understood. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. So, Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item? And if anyone hasn't had a chance to bring a slip up, please feel free to do so. We have some up here.
All right, Chair. So I have two so far. First being Jim Dantona and then Damian Mavis.
Good evening, Jim Dantona from the San Luis Obispo Chamber of Commerce. First, want to thank staff for the great work on this. We were able to have a presentation, bring in some voices. So I will be sharing comments to you as a stakeholder because of the speed of which this happened, and we did not want to slow it down. We didn't have a chance to create an actual position from the chamber board. But in moving these folks together, all the comments that you got in that public comment, I was just going to replicate. But also, I'll say this is a great program to help create kind of that more of that housing downtown, and hopefully, in turn, a benefit to our commercial and businesses that want to exist here. Additionally, making downtown much more walkable, bikeable, and really kind of hitting on our climate action goals too. It is a great opportunity to create, hopefully, what you were just talking about, Commissioner, about the size limits how much the cost will be. And in talking with some of our stakeholders, the idea being that right now, 4 young professionals living together in a big house would be able to have their own space in downtown rather than having to share. Hopefully that then opens up a little more space for someone else again, and starts to at least hold the line on prices, which is obviously one of the biggest concerns in driving our economy forward, the housing costs, and making sure we're doing everything we can to keep our community thriving. We have just a couple, I would say, just a couple recommendations from what we talked about, and I think Michael addressed it perfectly regarding the concerns about 500 that you've heard about. But the fact that we have a chance maybe at 250 to check in, 2 months in, we're already at 250. We can go, whoa, this did take off. If it takes a while and it doesn't come to fruition too fast, maybe then we're all good. The only concern is that, we really don't want to see someone come in and throw in a sloppy application for 500, eat them all up, and having it. So maybe there's something in there where we look long term that your permit for these is only good for a short time if you're not going to make those happen. Because that would be the worst case scenario, is that one person holds them all and then 9 years later we don't end up with any of them. And then Commissioner Jorgensen, the position on zero parking, we agree, want to be a voice on that if the zero parking were to follow that, we think that'd be great. And make that parking get into the structures, if people had any, and again, reduce costs to creating the housing in the downtown core. So thank you so much for your consideration tonight.
Hello, my name is Damian Mavis. I live and work in SLO as a builder and a developer. So they say great cities have great downtowns. I think the jewel of SLO is our downtown, and it deserves and gets support from its residents, visitors, elected officials, etc. More housing downtown provides more customers for shops and restaurants. More eyes on the street prevents crime. More community stakeholders to organize and get behind downtown programs and events. So for those reasons, I enthusiastically support the flexible density program, but I would like it to go a little bit further. So I would say, please think about eliminating the parking requirements for the units under 600 square feet. Eliminate the cap at 500 units and eliminate the sunset of the program. The last two, I think, are sort of addressed by the previous comments, but please think about eliminating the parking requirements. So eliminating parking requirements would be an identifiable cost savings and help promote the production of the housing. In an urban context, private developers are not really good at providing parking. Small surface lots break up the streetscape. There's few projects that are big enough to build a parking structure. Nobody's done it so far in our downtown. So I think the residential parking passes in city parking structures are the best scenario. So I think everybody sort of agrees on that. in the CD zone, the developer has the ability to pay in lieu fees instead of building parking. But at the current rate, this fee adds about $20 per square foot to the build cost of each residential unit. That $20 a square foot is a meaningful portion of the construction cost and is a barrier to construction. I can tell you it's a major reason why more residential doesn't get built downtown. A fair amount of units have been planned and none really have been built. I think in the last several years, while 1,000 homes have been built elsewhere in town, maybe 8 or 10 have been built downtown. Eliminating the parking requirements for just the residential units under 600 square feet would be a way to reduce the construction costs of those units by 5 to 10%, which would help promote affordable by design and modest housing units. I think you can look, interestingly enough, in 2010, the mayor of San Antonio, Texas, Julian Castro, who would become the HUD secretary and a presidential candidate, declared San Antonio was entering the decade of downtown with a goal set of providing 7,500 new housing units downtown, which would spur its revitalization. He incentivized the housing by a combination of elimination of impact fees and property tax reductions. Those together were about a 10% reduction in construction costs. By the end of the decade, there were 7,000 new apartments and condos, 1,600 more approved. Crime declined by 33%, jobs increased by 57%, new campus downtown, et cetera. So I think this is a very worthy goal, worthy of support. Thank you.
All right, next speaker is going to be Miles Couch, followed by Steve DeMartini and Remy Wolf.
Hello, I also want to speak in support of the program. I'm someone who is a renter living fairly close to downtown near Mitchell Park. And I can certainly say that it's a landlord's market right now. It was very hard to find a rental unit, and my landlord is currently raising our rent by 10%. So I attribute that to the low vacancy rates in the downtown area. As to the parking requirement, I can say that I think it's totally possible for someone to live in that area without a car. I have a car only because I do have a reserved parking spot, but I've been thinking that I could sell it if my landlord builds an ADU in our backyard, as they've been thinking of doing, and I would have access to shopping, doctor's office, grocery store, restaurants, and most everything I need within a pretty easy walking or biking distance. My only criticism or concern is that it is really a small area of downtown that this is proposed for. My concern would be that this is implemented and then doesn't really result in anywhere near the 500 units that are hoped for. To me, it would make sense to expand it to the south, at least through the Emerson Park and Mitchell Park neighborhoods, if not further down closer to South Street. And so I hope that that's something that's considered. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve DelMartini, San Luis Obispo. I want to say that I'm a realtor here in San Luis, and our government affairs director, Jocelyn Brennan, did send in a letter on our behalf, so I hope that you had time to read that. So I'm not going to restate whatever she had put out there, but I do support the 3 points that we made: the 2029 expiration date, the 500 unit cap, and the parking. But what I wanted to kind of touch on here is some of the comments on pricing. I have been a realtor in San Luis Obispo for 45 years. I've been involved in development in the past, and I think that when you come to pricing, the hardest thing is to try to determine 2 years out what the price will be on something, because I would assume that's about the minimum time it would take to build something in downtown if you submit it today. So I think it's very difficult to say what something would be worth. I think that maybe what you have to do is you have to look back 2 years and see what the prices were then. Maybe that's how you would come to something. Because I know that there's been many times in the past where a developer will say, well, I think my houses are going to sell for 700. They come on the market, they're 950,000, and then the public says, you said it was going to be 700,000. So the market is really what will determine your pricing, and especially in inventory. You know, we have such a lack of inventory I can tell you that about 3 days ago in the multiple listing service, and this does not include any of the 3 developments that are underway, the San Luis Ranch Outlet or any of the Rigetti, there were 10 condos in San Luis. Okay, so, you know, and there were 37 houses or 38 houses. So when you have a lack of inventory, the market is going to determine what your pricing is going to be, even though a developer has already determined what he thinks he needs to get to make it work. But that will really determine some of the outlook that you'll have on your pricing. I do want to say that I think that there's great benefits to the development community on this program. I think adding additional units without having to go to density bonuses for affordable, using the extra space that's left over to add units, I think that's just a win. Okay, because the more units you can get in under your pricing, then maybe the less price you have to ask with more units. But market will determine it. I have a hard time with the thought of square footage, you know, determining the market value. The market will determine the market. So that's what I have to say, and I appreciate your time. Thanks.
All right, Remy Wolf, and then Kimmy Nguyen.
Hi, so I am a renter in the city of SLO, and my experience as a renter has been paying way too much money to live in places that are not well maintained because there's no incentive for landlords to maintain their properties when there's a demand that is far above the supply. So I'm absolutely supportive of anything that increases the supply of housing in SLO, and especially something that does it intelligently. And considering downtown is, you know, already the most dense and most walkable part of SLO, I think it makes a lot more sense to put units there. And I'd like to echo just what some of the other commenters have already said. I do think the program could go further in terms of increasing the area, and if affordability is concerned, then definitely removing the minimum parking requirements. There's, like I said, it's a very walkable area. We just had some fantastic new bike lanes go downtown, so I think you could definitely do away with that. But overall, I think this is a great program and I support it.
All right, Chair, our last speaker is Kimmy Nguyen, and if anybody else needs to submit a card, please do so now.
Hi, Planning Commissioners. My name is Kimmy Nguyen. I've been a resident of SLO about 6 years now. I'm speaking in support of this project. I think it is just one baby step that, and I think the staff report spoke to this, it's one piece of the puzzle that we can take to tackle the incredible housing mess we're in right now. It's not the only step, but I think it's an important one. I support the ordinance, but would like to encourage the commissioners to consider a few changes to make it more impactful for our community. So firstly, I want to see if it's possible to expand the program for the entire downtown area and not just the downtown core. When looking at a lot of the properties that this would apply to, a lot of them are already developed. They're very profitable, productive retail spaces, or they've been redeveloped in the last 10 years, maybe not as likely to see redevelopment before the sunset date of 2030. So that's the first thing. Just allow the benefits to spread throughout downtown and more builders the opportunity to redevelop. Second thing, if we could allow projects to use the state density bonus in addition to this flexible density program. I didn't understand the math doesn't work out explanation, but density bonus is probably the only way any of these units would end up being affordable, right, in downtown. So I think we can chew gum and walk at the same time, possibly. Thirdly, please consider expanding relaxed requirements to units greater than 600 square feet. I understand the 600 square feet, why we might want smaller units. I also think allowing for a greater range of unit sizes might allow for a greater diversity of people who end up getting to move there, and for our downtown to be flexible, to be resilient. It needs to have a lot of different families and individuals in it. I'm a young working professional, but I don't think I should be the only one available or able to live in downtown in one of these units. And then lastly, please consider allowing the program to continue without an expiration date or an arbitrary unit cap. A longer time horizon would allow more property owners and builders just to weather the really, really exorbitantly high building costs we're facing and interest rates we're facing, and hopefully allow more people to enjoy the benefits of living downtown. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, that was the last public comment.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone who provided public comment. Members of the Planning Commission, do we have any additional questions for staff?
We do. We had a comment from the SLO chamber, a hypothetical situation where a developer puts in, I think the phrase used was a sloppy application for all 500. Do we have some sort of use it or lose it provision, or how would that situation be addressed?
Yes. So an entitled an entitled project would have an expiration of 1 year. So once you receive your entitlement, it expires after 1 year. You can request an extension for another year and then another year. But once you get to 3 years, you have to come to the Planning Commission for any further extensions. Under the emergency proclamation that was under the pandemic recently, there were some automatic extensions that were granted to our existing projects. That's why we see a lot of active projects that are still in the pipeline today. And then if you have a building permit, it expires a year after inactivity, or is it 6 months? 6 months of inactivity. So we would be enforcing those as we always do.
And I had one as well. It sounded like there's still some confusion about the density bonus calculation. So I just wanted, if you could explain kind of the base density calculation and that we need to establish that foundation. That'd be
no problem. Yeah, so the density bonus law is a unique law that was established by the state of California in providing an opportunity to increase the base density of a property if you provide a certain amount of units as affordable. There are provisions under the density bonus law that would be available to properties that include inclusionary housing or include affordable housing as standard incentives. So if a developer chose to use the flexible density program and dedicated units as affordable, they would be entitled to some of the standard benefits for providing affordable housing. However, the density bonus portion of it itself mathematically doesn't work because it's all based off of the base density. So the question is, base density is how many units can you fit on your property? Under our 10,000 square foot example, we had 8 density units. There's your base density is 8 density units. So you'd have a 50% bonus on top of that would give you 12 density units to work with. And you have to dedicate a portion of those as affordable. Under the flexible density program, there isn't a base density. As many units as you can fit within the property envelope is based off your creativity, design, and life safety issues. So that we wouldn't be able to mathematically provide a density bonus, nor would you need to, because you'd be able to provide those additional units without having to use a density bonus as a tool to get those same amount of density units as you would otherwise. So it's really presented as an either or scenario. I know I'm probably simplifying it a little too much, or maybe it's still a little more complicated. I'm not quite sure. So let me know if you need more explanation. It's a weird one.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm gonna, at the risk of asking to re-explain this, it sounds like the flexible density program will give you more units than the density bonus would have. Is that fair to say? Okay. Does that help those of you who are concerned about that? This is better, right? Okay. And then I did have a question about, there's a number of comments about increasing beyond the downtown core. And so can you talk to that a little bit and what the ramifications would be? Do we start getting into different zoning areas besides CD and CR, right? Is that part of the problem?
Correct. Yeah. So the program currently is not designed to accommodate any projects outside the CR or CD zone. I have on the screen here is the actual downtown core and planning area that was identified in the land use elements. So you can see the planning area is shaded gray. And as you mentioned, there are several different zones within this area, such as office, low density residential, tourist commercial, community commercial, lots of different zones. So the the program was intended to just really focus on the higher intensity areas of our community. So zoning is obviously based off of intensity of development. So we wanted to include a flexible density program where the highest intensity of our downtown core is provided, which is the CR and CD zoning.
Also like to add that, the downtown concept plan sees those areas differently. So where the downtown concept plan has vignettes designed by, architects and folks that were part of the creative vision team when we did the update to the downtown concept plan. Those beautiful designs can't be accomplished without a program like flexible density. And so we're really specifically trying to accomplish something with this small change to a standard to help achieve a design vision for our core that also has economic development benefits and a number of other, benefits that you've heard about. The area, the Mid-Higuera area, which has an area plan already and received a pretty significant increase in development potential years back, was identified more as a potential area for a funk zone type development. So Santa Barbara has been very successful in identifying an area in their downtown core, similarly just west of their downtown core, the way Mid-Higuera is just south of our downtown core. And they relaxed parking standards and a number of other, use requirements, and the area has really benefited from that. So I can see the downtown concept plan sort of drives us to something different for the Mid-Higuera area, and we're looking forward to working with those property owners who I think also are coming together with a vision. But we've already, through the Mid-Higuera area plan, done some rezoning and put in some both standards for public improvements as well as private development that we think will support ultimately, growth the way those property owners want to take the neighborhood. Also, the big thing that's happening in the Mid-Higuera area is a flood control project, the Mid-Higuera bypass. And so we're basically acquiring property, creating a parallel channel for San Luis Creek to help resolve some pretty significant flooding problems that exist right there at that choke point where the Marsh Street Bridge crosses over San Luis Creek. So a few other reasons why Mid-Higuera is considered better for different programs.
Okay, thanks. That helps. And Mid-Higuera, just to clarify, is basically Marsh to Madonna?
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a little bit of area kind of between that and the downtown core. I guess you'd call that the last few blocks of Higuera coming down to Marsh. How is that treated right now? And is that potentially part of this discussion?
That area was identified in the downtown concept plan. But the downtown concept plan is not a guiding document for establishing a boundary or providing for direct policy. Well, it provides policy objectives. And so other than that, there is a distance between the downtown core and the Mid-Higuera enhancement plan that doesn't have any additional programmatic or area policy objectives associated with it. So
could this kind of program be expanded to other parts of the city and downtown, like that area?
Potentially. So we would need to identify a boundary. And so we have an existing boundary such as the downtown core, and we have an existing boundary for the downtown planning area. And so establishing a different boundary other than those that's not already existing would require going back to the drawing board regarding environmental review, rezoning, classifications, and things like that we would need to consider. So we need additional research to identify expanding the boundary.
I think that maybe falls under the category of this is our first step, right? And then to close the loop on this sloppy application thing, so if that happens and a permit expires, then those units would go back into the 500 queue, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Jorgensen, I saw that you still have a comment?
A couple of comments and thoughts. But first, I do want to show some appreciation for our planning staff to go through an exercise like this. You can see there are a lot of moving parts when you look at the zoning ordinance, the various downtown plans we've got. You look at the general plan, you look at the housing element itself and what we promised to do and where we are in it. So I'm actually pretty excited about this. I would say, because in a sense this is an experiment, it's kind of a proof of concept maybe that we could try something different and make it work, that we should treat it like an experiment. That is, we should follow up, we should report on it. I'm seeing 6 years. I would kind of hope the 6 years might be that the council might decide to modify it simply to make it the first day, 60 years after the ordinance is actually approved, so that we don't find ourselves with 4.5 or 5.5 or something like that. But perhaps a report halfway through, let's say 3 years in, that really goes and looks at what things work, what we might add, and have a formal process so that we could really go at it. In that light, I would certainly prefer to see us start out with a couple more experiments, and one of them, in my mind, would certainly be to maybe not require parking at all. And in a certain sense, that's also a way of letting the market decide. There's nothing to keep a property owner or developer to say, well, the kind of audience I would like to bring to bear here may need a few parking spaces like this, or I can unbundle parking. And if people need it, I'll have it available, but they'll pay extra for it so that I don't charge everybody for it. I still love to see that kind of thing. And then if it just, in 3 years, it can't create much havoc because it takes so long to get anything done. But it could be things could be modified at, say, 3 years in, so that we all take this seriously, because I think it's an exciting experiment, but there's also an opportunity cost. It means other things we can't do or don't have the staff wherewithal or resources to do. And so we want to be pretty sure this is really going to make a big difference. It does look like it should add some units, whether it solves the whole host of the cluster of problems around housing. It may or may not, but I think it's a great experiment and worth doing. So I would be willing to move to approve the draft ordinance.
Do you have a second?
Actually, I have a comment or a question for staff. Looking, and this is more now a technical question rather than a substantive one, I think. Looking at the proposed resolution, at the end of section 2, there's some language there that I'm not sure if it was put in inadvertently or not, referring to amendments to the initial study and negative declaration. Just so I'm clear, was this addendum already adopted by the city council?
No, that is actually an error, and so we would appreciate the commission to do a modification to the resolution to clarify that the addendum is being proposed to the city council as part of the final adoption of the program, and not already approved. So thank you for catching that.
To quickly put Ghost back, we have a motion on the floor, and you agreed to incorporate. And do we have a second?
Then I would second to move staff's recommendation as amended.
All right. And do you have any additional comments on overall? Okay. Do you have any comment on ordinance overall? Now we have a motion on the floor. Yeah, you've done it. Okay. Yeah. That's right now. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So when I looked through the public issues that I saw in the public comments that came in, the issues that I mostly saw were remove the 500 unit cap, like sky's the limit, remove the deadline, infinity's the limit, expand, make it bigger. To me, those all fall under the category of let's get started. Let's see how it goes. We can change it. We can expand it. We can make it bigger, and if we need to. The parking thing seems to me something that we could take a whack at tonight. I don't know where I stand on that exactly. I think in general, the general tone of the comments there was make more square footage for people, less for cars. I'm totally into that. I also appreciate the reality that, 10 years ago when Uber was just getting started and there was going to be car sharing everywhere and there was scooters all over the place, and this idea that, well, if you live someplace groovy, like, where you've got transit and you can walk to your Whole Foods and all that, then you're not going to need a car. And it hasn't quite worked out that way, it seems like. A lot of, I teach at Cal Poly. I asked my students, like, who has a car? In a class of 40, I get 30 plus hands that go up. So it is a reality. I'm not arguing for more parking. I just know that the cars are out there and they're going to end up somewhere. And so I am concerned about that. I like the idea of not having to provide more pavement and garages and real estate for cars. So again, I don't know exactly where I land on that. My other issue was cost, and I guess we just don't have an answer on that, because what we're talking about here is market rate units, and that's part of the market. I do believe that we need all of the above, and so we need more market units, we need more small units, we need more medium-sized units, we need more deed-restricted units, we need everything. And I also agree with the comment that I think this came from Ms. Nguyen, about we need not just tiny units, because in other places that I've lived that have been housing impacted, you do have to provide some sort of pathway to not just be a young professional, but what happens next. And then you have to make the leap all the way to a $1 million house at Avila Ranch. So I don't know the answer to that either, but I know that we got to try to push all the buttons and pull all the levers that we can to help the situation. So those are my comments. If we can talk about the parking thing, or is anybody at this table feeling like it's a good idea to remove the parking requirements for the sub 600 square foot units? And I would like to hear comments from staff as well.
And actually, that was a question I had for the motion maker. Is the elimination of the parking requirements included within the motion, or open for discussion?
Say it. I would certainly support it.
Okay.
I would definitely like to hear from staff, though, before we got much further as to the pros and cons of pushing that.
Okay. So it sounds like we could have staff comment on the concept of reducing. Would it be reducing just for under 600, because that's what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So do you mind commenting on that, Kyle?
Yeah, no problem. That would be in line with the intention of the program as providing an incentive for the production of housing. We don't foresee any conflicts with the environmental review analysis, because downtown does provide alternative parking, such as parking structures or the overnight parking program, and there's previous environmental review documents that identify reducing parking downtown, such as the one that was done in 1981. So I don't foresee any conflicts, but I'd look to my fellow colleagues here to see if there's any
Can I
hesitations.
prompt with another question? What do we see from other cities that have done this sort of thing before, and have they eliminated the parking requirement? Places like San Francisco, San Jose, San Antonio, whatever.
We are seeing a trend across multiple jurisdictions for reducing parking requirements. The state of California's recent policy initiatives are constantly focusing in on reducing parking requirements to support housing over parking. So all of this does sound pretty in line with current trends. I can't think of a specific example in California at the moment who provided for eliminating parking for smaller units, but I can think of one in the city of Bend in Oregon, just recently approved eliminating all minimum parking requirements for the entire city. So we are seeing a lot of changes and a lot of talking about this at this moment.
Thanks, Kyle. I think just to add to that discussion, I just want to clarify that for the downtown commercial zone, the standard already is 1/2 that required in other parts of the city. And so we are matching that in the retail commercial zone portion of this. So whereas the retail commercial zone currently has the full standard requirement for these units, this proposal would reduce that by half. So we are reducing the amount of required parking in the CR zone through the proposal already. One of the things I think, should the Planning Commission move forward with direction about no parking required for these units in the CD zone, one of the bigger things for us to consider is the fiscal impact to the city and to the parking fund. We are actively working to deliver brand new parking structure, facility that's going to, at the last estimate was to cost $35 million and is likely to cost more when bids for construction are received. And the in-lieu fee program is an important aspect of funding construction of new parking spaces in that, shared parking environment. So the main thing I think would be for us to evaluate individual projects as they come through, and determine if there's, what that impact is to the city's ability to provide parking for everybody. I know it's a concern, something that the city council actually wrestled with last night in terms of how to, accomplish things with downtown parking, like providing the first hour free, but also wanting to be able to afford to construct a brand new parking structure. So this is another one of those things where parking is the conversations are at opposite ends. And sometimes a decision like you're contemplating to eliminate a parking requirement might make it difficult for us to accomplish other goals of the parking program, like being able to afford maintenance and construction of new facilities. So our proposal is intended to be balanced in that regard. But as Kyle said, this is for the commission to decide.
Can I follow up on that? So it sounds like thank you for that, because I hadn't really thought that through. But it sounds like if we were to eliminate the parking requirement for sub 600, is it the value of every square foot being what it is? Is it likely that it would? Is that me? Sit back. Still squeaking. Okay. Isn't it likely that the developments that would come through would be paying for in lieu parking anyway? And so all we're doing is handing that $20 per square foot to the developer, who's then going to charge, as we learned, market rate. I know it has to do with, that's really starting to bother me. Is that me? What am I doing wrong?
Yeah, and I think, we've had discussions with developers, and you heard some testimony from developers tonight about the benefit of reducing costs. Reducing costs, there's potential outcomes there that would include just building the same unit, but being able to have the bottom line deliver more profit or make it easier to finance and construct the project. It might also enable a developer to build a different kind of unit than they would have otherwise, and be able to, a unit that maybe doesn't command quite as much rent, and maybe be able to provide more of those units. So it's hard to predict exactly, what or how developers will react to the requirement. You'll probably get some of both. You've got some developers that are really, thoughtful and considerate about helping the city achieve its objectives and providing units at a certain price point, and a reduction in fees and costs can help that be possible. In other cases, you'll have developers just, that are on a thin margin anyway with their project, and they're just, that's an advantage then to helping the project get financed and constructed.
Okay. And what is that in lieu fee right now? And if you had a 600 or 599 square foot unit, it would have to pay 0.5 of a in lieu. Is that right? Under the current plan?
So actually, it's the parking lieu fee is actually calculated based off the parking spaces. So for new construction or new square footage added to downtown, the any parking space associated with new construction would cost about $21,000 per parking spot. For conversion of existing space to more intensive uses, would be a reduced fee to be, I think it's close to $6,000 per parking space under today's fee structure.
Okay, so we're talking about 6 to 10.
6,000 per parking space. It's
6,000
much-
per parking space for
That's this
conversion of
converted
existing
thing. That sounds really
sorry.
cheap. Okay.
But do you have the cost of it? I can look it up. Do you have the cost of a parking space for new construction?
New construction should be about $21,000 or maybe 22 right now. We can look it up.
Okay.
So under the current plan, unless we take away this parking requirement completely for units under 600 square feet, they'd either have to provide the parking or pay the in lieu. And is it half of that? It's 0.5 of a unit of a parking space for that 600?
Yeah, so if you had new construction of, say, 10 units, that would require 7 parking spaces inclusive of guest parking. And so that would be, you'd pay for the new construction, and you'd pay 7 times $22,000.
Okay. And so per unit, that's going to work out to $10,000 or $15,000. Okay. I'm just trying to see what scale that occupies. You know where I'm going with that. So, and I've been on other planning environments where developers have come in and said things like, well, you're adding this much cost to my construction cost. So I'm going to add that to it's just going to make the unit more expensive, right? Sort of true. I mean, the unit's going to go for, as we learned, what the market will bear. And so we're talking about, and current cost per square foot is at least $500 a square foot for these kind of units, probably more like $600-700. So we're talking, I don't know, 6% or something like that. Does that sound about right? So I'm just trying to bracket that and respond to your comment about the fees.
Yeah, just to update what the numbers are there. The brand new park, for new construction, the standard fee per space is $29,667.
Okay, so it's even higher.
It was a little rusty on my
Yeah, and
end.
I'm not coming at this place trying to take money out of the developer's pocket. I'm just trying to recognize the reality that the cars are, there are going to be cars. They're going to go somewhere. If they go into the city garages or through a permit system or something like that, well, that all costs money too. And so it is an impact of the development, and it's complicated, right? So I'll stop.
And Commissioner Jorgensen, do you want to comment as the motion maker on your what you're thinking on parking?
Yeah. Well, obviously this is complicated to say the least. I guess my take on this is, as a planning commissioner, we want to kind of focus on land use issues and the implications, and not on all the issues around financing everything. Although I was doing this too, and I can see, we get to $5 million pretty quickly, just for 500 units, very, very roughly, and that could make a big difference in terms of what the city's able to do. But that's out of our bailiwick in a certain sense, it seems to me. Unless we're absolutely convinced nothing will get built, and there will be no land use interaction from this if we don't do something. But I'd like to find some way, and Michael, maybe you can help us think, at least to encourage the council to consider a way to do this, to perhaps find some way to, as part of this experiment, to somehow make parking optional, or some way to take a step to give us a little push that's within the land use side of this. But the way you've explained it, it sounds like it's sort of beyond our pay grade.
Is there a middle ground between the way it stands and no cost for parking?
I think what I've been hearing a lot from other communities is incentives for parking reductions, which, we already have some of those in our zoning regulations, but for this downtown core specific program, something we might be able to work on between now and the city council hearing would be active transportation commitments to reduce the parking requirement.
So since the actions we take tonight would represent a recommendation to the council, can we, insert some language that would say encourage the council or encourage staff to present additional options to the city council, something like that?
Sounds really good. I accept that. Maybe that's the best we can do.
Assuming it accepts it.
I guess I would still say second the motion as amended and amended.
All right.
Commission, I apologize. Before you take a vote on that, could you please just verbalize the first amendment? I think it was just the correction. Can you just verbalize that on the record, what that would be?
Sure. Amend the language at the end of section 2 to reflect that the council has not yet adopted this addendum.
Mm-hmm.
Are we all good on the language there? Or on the minute? Okay. So I guess I just really quickly wanted to comment on the motion on the floor. I think the elimination of the parking requirements with some of those caveats, I think is a step in the right direction. And I think that summarizes a lot of what we're looking at with this program is a big step in the right direction. I also think we'll have the opportunity to revisit this, as we said, once we hit 250, once we see these projects in operation, what the parking actually looks like. But I think it's a really exciting step forward for San Luis Obispo that not only accomplishes housing goals, but climate action goals, carbon reduction goals as well. And I also do feel that if there's not guaranteed parking spots in these units, it actually could be a way to add a new unit type, which is a sign of a healthy housing market, is a number of different housing options for folks. And not having a car is something that I think a lot of people are starting to adopt. And I can say anecdotally, a lot of my friends, even I know you were talking about college, but post-college, I think I've seen a lot of friends and colleagues eliminate vehicles when it's a little bit easier to walk and you don't have to drive to and from campus, that kind of thing. So I think it could be a really important step in the right direction for young professionals. I am conceptually in favor of increasing the downtown plan area, but I understand the constraints here today. But I think I'd like for us to maybe have another stab at that down the line. So we have a motion second. Are we right? Any other comments before we proceed with the vote?
Where do we stand on the second amendment? And maybe you're going to ask that too, like what exactly are we seeing there? We're recommending that council and staff consider some other steps on the parking part of this.
I think where we left it was we were going to insert language that encouraging staff to present additional options to reduce parking requirements or eliminate them to the council.
All right. Will the Deputy City Clerk please call the roll of the motion?
Commissioner Jorgensen? Aye. Commissioner Cooley?
Aye.
Commissioner Houghton? Vice Chair Hopkins?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
All right. All right. Would Deputy Community Development Director Tyler please provide us with an update on staff updates and agenda forecast?
Great. Thank you. Looking out, we have a couple meetings in March coming up. The first one on March 8th. We have one item. It's a use permit to allow for a mixed-use project that includes hotel space. It's like 3 hotel rooms there. Use permit requirement for that. That's the only item on the agenda on the 8th. And then looking out to the 22nd of March, we'll be doing a presentation on the general plan annual report. So should be a lot of great information that we'll be sharing about our progress towards completing our general plan programs and kind of update on residential growth management, commercial growth management, building permit issuances, number of housing units constructed over the past year, affordable, otherwise. So a lot of good information in that document and looking forward to presenting that on the 22nd.
Tyler, the use permit coming up on March 8th, do you have an address for us?
It is at 830 Orchid. And that concludes kind of the overview through March.
All right. So actually, I have a bit of a personal announcement. This is going to be my last planning commission meeting. Unfortunately, I will be moving from the area and will need to resign. So I'm going to be putting my resignation letter in tomorrow. But it's really been a pleasure working with you all. And I've just really enjoyed being in this role. And it's hard to leave. It's bittersweet, but leaving for personal reasons, wanting to start a family, and SLO's kind of expensive and hard to make work without a family, without family support. So it's a really bittersweet decision, but one that had to be made. So just thank you all. It's been a pleasure working with you. Yeah, it was kind of serendipitous. Oh, I should probably close the meeting, huh? So the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled for March 8th, 2023. I will not be there at 6 p.m. in the council chambers at City Hall, 990 Palm Street, San Luis Obispo. Meeting's adjourned. Yeah. Thank you.
Good job.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, going up to, I know this is like